welcome back to another edition of Tips and Tricks. Today we're going to look at the combination of Ridgewalk and Waymaker and how they can combine to emulate some popular granular effects. Specifically, we're going to look at some of the options on the Hologram Microcosm, which is a really awesome guitar pedal. And I don't have anything against it, but I think it's nice to use it as inspiration because it's kind of a gold standard right now, in my opinion. And I don't want to try to compare or contrast my tools to the microcosm, but I think there are a variety of reasons that you might want to use plugins instead of a physical piece of gear. For one, you might want to have multiple instances of a plugin running in one session, or maybe you just want to reopen a session later and pick up where you left off. So let's hop in. I've got this simple melody that I think would sound nice with some granular effects on it. Let's hear how it sounds. Pretty basic. So what I have going on here is I have Ridgewalk on a send channel. So I'm just going to start sending my melody to Ridgewalk. And the first microcosm patch we're going to take a look at is called Mosaic, which is this nice algorithm where you kind of get grains, random grains with different pitches. And I like using the version that gives you grains kind of anywhere from between -1 octave to 2 octaves up. So we're going to start by connecting Waymaker to Ridgewalk, and I'm going to change Waymaker to a weight sequencer. And I'm going to set that sequencer to progress every time a loop finishes. So every time a grain triggers, it's going to be a random pitch. And so by default, we've got a grain running at unison pitch and up 1 octave. So let's add a couple more. Let's add one that's down an octave, one that's 2 octaves up. So I'm going to increase the probability that they happen. I think I want the 2 octave up version to happen less frequently than the others. So that looks pretty good, about an even chance of plus or minus 1 octave, and then a remote chance of going up 2 octaves. Okay, so let's look at Ridgewalk now. What I'm going to do is I've got my buffer set up just to be 2 bars, which is the default. I'm not going to touch that. I'm going to go into the looper settings here. And what I want to do is introduce a lot of randomness. So I want to increase the number of loopers that are running. I'm going to increase the drift, which gives them random positioning and size. And then I'm going to turn up the random skip. So if you're not familiar with Ridgewalk, it's basically a granular effect where one grain triggers when the previous grain finishes. So it's kind of like a granular effect and a looper at the same time. It's kind of like, I think of it as a micro looper that's moving around, but I think most people would call it a granular effect. But what the random skip is going to do is that it's going to introduce bits of silence, because not every grain is actually going to fire. So let's start with having it silent 75% of the time. Then I'm just going to flip over to traversal. I'm going to put it in wander mode. We're just going to turn the speed all the way up. So what that's going to do is it's just going to pick grains from anywhere in the buffer. Cool. Let's hear how that sounds. So we've kind of got a big soup of different octaves and different playback speeds. It was cool to hear some of the lower octaves chiming in every now and then and kind of giving like a slow motion version of the melody. But because we are in a DAW, we can add some other stuff to this pretty easily. So I'm going to put a reverb after Ridgewalk. And I could do this with the blur setting, which introduces a nice reverb beyond 50%. But it also changes how the crossfade of the grains, kind of the shape of the grains, it also changes how, it morphs them from kind of being more of a trapezoidal shape to more of a triangle shape. So I don't necessarily want that to happen because I kind of like how they kind of enter and exit so quickly. So instead of using the blur setting, I'm just going to stick a reverb after Ridgewalk. I think I might turn down the probability of the lower octave. It's cool, but it can be a little overwhelming. Okay. And you can also mess around with how large these grains are. Maybe we want them to be really small. If you do this, you might have to turn up the random skip more because when the grains are shorter, they're firing more often. So if you want kind of the same proportion of silence, you would need to turn up the random skip. So I think it can be fun to do a really high skip percentage and really short grains. And another thing that's cool is we can introduce panning as well. Ridgewalk doesn't have any panning options built in, but most DAWs do. So I'm going to go ahead and put an auto pan after Ridgewalk. You could also put it before Ridgewalk if you wanted to kind of print this stereo motion into Ridgewalk. But I'm just going to set up a little auto pan that's moving slowly. And now our grains are going to get panned all over the place. Let's add this bass line on top of this. And another thing I like doing is when we've got Ridgewalk on a send channel like this, I like to send a little percentage of just everything over there. So let's send some of the bass line too. Cool. And another algorithm that the Hologram Microcosm has is called haze, which kind of functions similarly to mosaic in that it plays back grains at multiple octaves, but it's a bit less plucky it kind of turns your sound into more of a continual soundscape, which is nice. So one way we can emulate that in Ridgewalk, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to move this auto pan before Ridgewalk like I was saying. So we're going to print the stereo changes to Ridgewalk. And then I turned off the reverb after Ridgewalk, and I'm going to turn up the blur all the way. And instead of using the random skip here, we're actually going to flip over to the random volume. What this mode does is it kind of gives a random ducking to each grain. It kind of reduces its volume a little bit. So it can kind of give you just variations and stop your sound from turning into just like a full wall. It can kind of add these nice swells and push and pull. So let's hear how that sounds. So that's a little loud, but of course you can always dial in the volume of it. You could sidechain this against like a kick drum or something. And of course, over here in Waymaker, we can kind of control the proportions of each of the different pitches. You can even, instead of doing just octaves, we can use fifths as well to kind of really get something harmonically rich going. I think also reversing the buffer is nice if you want to take a plucky sound like this and kind of turn it into an atmosphere. Cool. So I hope this gives you some ideas of how you can use the combination of Waymaker and Ridgewalk to try to emulate some of the really awesome pedals and other tools out there.